Good morning, Greater Phoenix. My name is DeMarco Case, and I am the Civic Engagement Chair for the Greater Phoenix Urban League Young Professionals. And I hail with you this morning from Murfreesboro, Tennessee, as I am traveling. But I'm glad that you're on with us this morning as we are coming into our second series of our Brunch and Learn, where we'll be talking about government hierarchy. So we have some pretty important people in the Valley on this morning to just give us information about government hierarchy, maybe answering your questions about anything that you saw on your ballots, anything about voting, and just community in general. And so I'm glad to be here this morning, and moderating with me this morning is my cohort, Victoria. So I'll let her come on and introduce herself.
Good morning, Phoenix. So I'm Victoria Iamba, and I currently serve on the Leadership and Development Committee with the Greater Phoenix Urban League Young Professionals. I have lived in Phoenix now. It will be a year on Tuesday. So this year went by really fast, but as I moved here, I really wanted to learn more about Phoenix politics and how everything is run, because moving from a different state, things are different. And, I think it's important to be engaged in the community. So I'm really excited to be here with you all and having this conversation and just learning about why, our local and federal government is so important to our community. So today we have 3 guest panelists with us. Our first panelist that we have is Deidre Aboud. She has lived in Phoenix since 1998. She is an attorney, author, entrepreneur, word traveler, and a social justice commentator. She works for a lot of social justice and advocates for civil rights. So please welcome Deidre. Do you have anything else you want to add about yourself?
Hi, I'm Deidre.
Great. Next, we have Shelly Jackson. She currently serves as a Deputy Director of Training and Engagement at the Instituto, an organization that is with a mission that is based on sustained political power for low-income, Black, Indigenous communities of color here in Arizona. So please welcome Shelly, and if you have anything else you want to say about yourself.
No, I think that sums it up. Thank you.
And our third panelist with us is Carl Gentles. He currently sits as a partner for the Gentles Agency and ran previously for U.S. Congress to represent Arizona's 6th congressional district. He has been active in working on numerous political campaigns here in Phoenix and federally, and he works to serve our community in regards to making a difference in school children's lives and supporting basic needs for education for K-12. So please welcome Carl Gentles.
Well, good afternoon. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Okay. Victoria, would you like to? Oh, well, hey, well, look, we have a special guest this morning. So Mayor Tempe, Corey Woods. So Corey, welcome. Thank you for, giving us a bit of your time this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Apologize for being late. Was having a little technical issue over here, but I'm just excited to be with you.
No, thank you. We're very excited that you could join us as well. Mayor Woods was recently elected to be the mayor of Tempe this past March, on March 10th, and was just sworn in on this past July 2nd. So, and previously he served 2 terms for the Tempe City Council from 2008 to 2016. So, we're thrilled to have you, to see how your work has continued within the community.
Thank you. Really excited to be here, and it's been an interesting little over 3 months, I guess, sort of governing during COVID and a lot of conversation around, police reform and a lot of other challenging, not just local, but national issues. But it's exciting to be there and exciting to be able to make a difference.
Absolutely. Okay. So, we'll go ahead and just jump into our conversation this morning. And again, we're here to educate our community, provide any information that we can to our viewers. So Victoria, I'll let you go ahead and start with the first question. And again, if anybody has any feedback, please just give us your take.
All right, so I guess this first question is broadly for the group, and each person can, take a chance in answering it. So I guess I want to know how your work individually. So, like Deidre, you as an attorney, Carl as a political figure, Shelley as a community organizer, and Mayor Woods now as the mayor. How has your work informed your work in the community, and like how you kind of got into wanting to be engaged in like politics and bettering our local communities? So maybe you can start with you.
My journey started. Sorry. My journey started in around 2001, in the summer of 2001, and really, I didn't know what to do, but there was an opportunity to do something. Basically be a secretary on a nonprofit. So I jumped into that, and then for me, September 11th happened, which was an entirely different situation. So I jumped into the deep end, and immediately had to stand up for things that I had never even thought about before, and literally was at a meeting and just nobody knew the answer to a question, and I stepped forward and answered the question, and that was the leap that started my advocacy. And what I learned most in the early years was how important coalition building was, and how interrelated our issues were. And that was very enlightening to me. It was a big struggle to get other people to understand that what affects you also affects other people. And so you could work together. You don't have to do it individually. And then I just, kept on with that. I had an interaction with our Pios people about, they knowing the law but not wanting to follow the law. So that sent me to law school. And then I opened up my own law firm and continued to do civil rights. Then I just said, it's time to stop. I was always holding politicians accountable, but it was time to move forward to actually get involved in the details instead of just saying, that's dirty stuff, that let other people handle that. So I think a lot of people in 2016 and 2017 decided to step forward and say, yeah, normal people need to be involved in this, and I'm a person that feels like I can do it.
Thank you. Carl, would you like to go next? Oh, you're muted.
There we go. Well, first, again, it's great to be here, and great honor to be on the same panel with Mayor Corey Woods, who is a good friend. And congratulations, Corey, on everything that you've accomplished so far. And keep up the good work, my friend. We are, my journey started, many years ago, working as an intern for the Bruce Babbitt for President campaign. And I actually fell into that as a junior at ASU as a communications degree candidate, working on my degree then, looking for an opportunity to do an internship. I ran across the Babbitt for President, which was 1988, so that dates myself. And so it really started from there, and getting an opportunity to work on a presidential campaign very early in my career, and then went on to work for U.S. Senator John McCain, which is where my formative years in politics really took place. And it really informed me about a couple of things, that politics is really about service. And if you're really serious about service, politics is a great place to place that service. And from there, I've gone on to work in a number of other political campaigns, and then have been working in the nonprofits field for the last 11, 12 years, in addition to running our own PR firm. So, all of those experiences really informed kind of where I found myself in early 2019, when we started looking at running for Congress ourselves directly, because we just didn't really see the representation that we thought we needed in our district, which is Congressional District 6 up in North Phoenix, basically. And so as we took a look at making that transition from being behind the scenes in politics for the most part to being out front as the candidate, really felt like it was the right time to make that move. And while we didn't prevail this time, we really felt like we've created something that will carry us into the future. And more importantly, I think the overall message is that no matter if you decide to be a political candidate yourself, or you work in the nonprofit sector or any other community organizing role, it's just so critically important, especially this year in this cycle. And it will be even more important as we go forward, that you find your space and your niche and you get involved in some capacity in some way. And so my message to all the young professionals in the Urban League and everybody else listening is find what your passion is and get in there and do something. Get involved with a candidate. Deidre Aboud's a wonderful candidate. Corey Woods out there in Tempe, many others that are listening and on the ballot right now. Get involved right now, because our future is really at stake, and we do need participation across the board from young professionals and others in this community.
Thank you. Shelley, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. Again, thank you all for having me. My name is Shelley Jackson. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'll talk a little bit about how I got into the work that I'm doing, and then I would love to dive in a little bit more to what does it mean to be a community organizer and how that shows up while I'm doing that and while I'm in the community. So I actually got started a few years ago. I was at ASU majoring in dance. So I majored in dance for about 3 years, and through that process and through being at ASU, I think that my awakening continued to what was happening in the world. I like to tell folks that my education journey was a really big indicator to me on how I ended up in certain places, or how what resources were allocated to me or what resources weren't, depending on where I was at the time. So I'm born and raised here in South Phoenix, went to high school at Tempe High, and then ended up going to ASU. And what I always noticed was that depending on who you were or what schools you went to, some things were accessible and some things weren't. And when I got to college, that was made even more apparent when I was the only one in my dorm who had to work and go to school. When I was the only one in classrooms who was staying up all night and trying to help out family and do other things instead of just being a student in the moment. And so for me, I got a little angry, I got a little frustrated, and I used that to change my major. I ended up changing my major to community advocacy and social policy, and then getting involved locally in my community. So I started off organizing with Arizona Coalition for Change and Our Voice, Our Vote Arizona, doing a lot of work, not only with candidates, but also looking at many different issues that our communities face. So voter suppression, thinking about access and expansion of public transportation, gentrification, equitable education, things of that nature. And when I think about community organizing, what I'm truly thinking about is how do we move policy? How do we impact policy? And how do we advocate for ourselves in our community while always keeping the people who are directly impacted at the forefront? How do we always center the people who are directly impacted? And I always go back to that because I think it's so important. When we get into this work, we get really excited. We always want our voice to be heard, but we forget that when we're advocating for our community, there are certain people who will get the brunt of whatever it is that we are doing. And so for me, I always like to make sure that when I'm advocating, when I'm talking to community, there's this quote that I love that says, the people who are closest to the pain should be the closest to the power. And the folks who are closest to the problem are more than likely closest to the solution. So they know what they need. We just have to make sure that we're passing the mic and giving folks an opportunity to make their voices heard and make sure that they're the ones centered in the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Mayor Woods, would you like to kind of describe how you kind of got into and decided to further your involvement in the community?
Sure. I mean, so from my perspective, I mean, I really ended up getting involved in the political world because I grew up in a family of people who were very politically active. They talked to me all the time at the dinner table. I always say dinner time at the Woods household was 2 hours, always. And it was not as much about, how was your homework and how was school, but it was talking about domestic policy and foreign policy. My father spent nearly 20 years with the National Urban League. So it's one of those things when you grow up in that kind of home and you're having those conversations about social justice and equality, it shapes who you want to become as an adult. My mother was a high school teacher in New York City, many times teaching mostly, African American and Latino students, and so many times who didn't have a lot of money and did not come from wealthy, privileged backgrounds. And so when you're having conversations like that every night at the dinner table, it shapes the person that you want to become. And I was just really excited when I got to be of a certain age that I had the opportunity to run for the city council in Tempe. My father used to always say to me, Corey, what's amazing is the things that you and your brother have an ability to do were things that, frankly, at a comparable age, your mother and I would have never had opportunities to do. So, whatever you do, make sure that you take it seriously, listen to the community, and don't squander it. And so when I first, ran for council back in 2006, I didn't win that race, but I won in 2008 and got reelected again in 2012 and just recently got elected mayor. I was always taught that the most important thing about public service is it's not about yourself. It's not about enriching yourself. It's not about turning yourself into a cult figure in the eyes of people, that it becomes all about you. It's about serving people. It's about serving the community. And it's about many times helping people who don't normally have the ability or might not have the know-how when it comes to how do they access and petition their government. It's about helping those people have a voice and have a vote when it comes to our system. So I'm really proud to be involved in it at this point, and really proud to be mayor of the city of Tempe, and have always kept that focus that it's important to make sure that it's not about me and wearing a fancy suit and, getting on TV. It's about that person who's living in a very challenging situation and needs access to resources or needs access to whatever it is they happen to need so they can achieve the best they can in their life. And that's what I'm committed to each and every day.
Great. Thank you. Thank you everyone for, sharing a tidbit. It's great to learn, a little bit about everyone. So yeah, we'll just continue on. We'll start with our second question here. So here in Arizona, especially Maricopa County, we've seen tremendous growth over the past few years. So how has that growth affected the current election cycle? So we'll start with Ms. Deidre, if you have any feedback on that question.
We have definitely the demographics and the activity level and the decision making for Maricopa County the electorate has changed. 4 years ago, 8 years ago, the legislative districts were not as active in Maricopa County. Now, some of them are just extremely, extremely active. 4 to 8 years ago, Maricopa County, the Dem Party, for example, on the county level was focused on all the elections, and this year they decided to focus very much on the local elections. Typically in Maricopa County and across the country, really, people were focused on the top of the ticket and didn't really know anything about the bottom of the ticket. And a lot of people are much more involved with local politics now, at least aware of them and aware of how much they impact them or can do local defense. And then also a lot of time is focused on how many people are registered by different parties. The independent party, or lack of party designation, has grown exponentially in Arizona, in Maricopa County specifically. So when people are saying, a certain area has more Republicans than Democrats, it's a shoo-in that this Republican's going to win. No, the independents actually are going to decide this election. So it's changed a lot this year.
Thank you for that feedback. Carl, do you have anything to add to
Sure.
that?
I agree with a lot of what Deidre said. For context, we have to think about, we have to understand how fast this growth in Arizona Maricopa County has been over the last several years. Arizona is the 48th state in the union to join the union back in 1912, but today we're the 13th most populated state in the nation with 7.2 million residents. And that's behind first place California, 39.5 million. So what that tells you is that Arizona has been growing exponentially over the last several years, particularly since 2014, when we've experienced about a 1.5% growth year over year. But it's important to understand when it comes to the politics of Arizona, that Maricopa County is where the concentration and action is. So whatever happens in Maricopa County effectively carries the state, because in Maricopa County, of that 7.2 million people, we have almost 3.5 million residents, actually 4.5 million residents here in Maricopa County. And so that's almost 63% of the state's population. So when you think about that, anything that happens in Maricopa County, whether it's from a ballot proposition, statewide ballot proposition, or otherwise statewide candidate, whatever happens in Maricopa County effectively defines what's going to happen in the election. So just to give you a little bit more context, I have a couple of notes that, total voter registration in Arizona is 4 million voters. And the total registration in Maricopa County is 2.5 million. So that's 61% of all the registered voters in the entire state of Arizona are in Maricopa County. And by contrast, Pima County only has 15% of the total registered votors, and Pinal County at 6%. So you see that everything really is concentrated on Maricopa County, which is why across the nation, people have been watching Maricopa County as a bellwether for the rest of the country. It's ranked as one of the six counties to watch across the country when it comes to national politics, particularly because we have a very tight race for president here. We have a tight race for U.S. Senator here as well, and some really strong House races. And so, it's important to realize that with the growth of Maricopa County in the state, also grows the total number of people that are voting. And so, to Deidre's point, the split based on the numbers in January of this year between parties was basically even, 34% Republican, 32% Democrat, and 31% independent. Now, the thing that you have to understand about those numbers is that when it comes to this cycle, the enthusiasm around voting has really been swinging on the side of the Democrats, where Democrats have registered far more people than Republicans over this last year. And so that's one of the reasons why you're seeing that in Maricopa County, that you're going to have some really close races where you may not have before, where Republicans traditionally have turned out in more numbers than Democrats. You're seeing just a Democratic surge in voter registration, the return of their ballots. And so I think you're going to see some really surprising results this time around.
Thank you, Carl and Deidre, for that answer. This is my first election cycle since moving to Phoenix, and learning the politics and the different elected roles can be really confusing. And so I think it could be helpful, maybe on a high level, to maybe kind of explain the government structure or hierarchy here for Maricopa County. And so, Mayor Woods, would you mind speaking to that?
Sure. So I think that a lot of what Carl said, I would echo, is that what I've seen in the last couple of elections here is that Arizona clearly is becoming a lot more purple. When I first moved here, it was sort of a very different situation when I moved here back in 2003. But I mean, for a while, at first, I remember, Janet Napolitano was governor, Terry Goddard was attorney general. But then pretty much what I saw over the next number of years was that the state had shifted very much red, and pretty much all of the people who were statewide elected officials were Republicans.
Right.
And over the last couple of years, things have begun to shift. I mean, in 2018, there were 4 women, Democratic women, who were elected statewide in Arizona, and I think it was Senator Kirsten Sinema, Commissioner Sandra Kennedy, Secretary of State Katie Hobbs, and State Superintendent of Public Instruction Kathy Hoffman. And so I think that kind of foretold even a lot of what we're seeing in some of the numbers here in Arizona, where even if you look at the average of a lot of the polling, it might be sort of within the margin of error, somewhere between 2 to 4 percentage points. But it's been very surprising to see, former Vice President Joe Biden has been leading in almost all of those polls coming out of Arizona. And this is a state that a Democrat has not won, since 1996, since Bill Clinton. So, it's very, but I think that if you look even at those 2018 numbers from just a couple of years ago, there was a little bit of a foreshadowing, and I think we could have seen this coming a little bit. I mean, of course, everything is somewhat based on the individual candidate, but I think the state is clearly shifting in a much more purple direction, because I think you are getting younger people moving here. You're getting more diversity in the city and in the state of Arizona, as well as Maricopa County. And I think that explains some of the shifts that we're seeing when it comes to actual voting.
Yeah, if I could add a little bit to that, one of the most important things to watch is taking place down at the state legislature, because you've got a legislature that has been controlled by the Republican Party for, the greater part of 50 years. But what you're seeing is, to Corey's point, what you're seeing over the last few cycles is that gap has been narrowing to the point that the Democrats are within striking distance of taking the House and, in some respect, the Senate. And so that's the state legislature, House and Senate. And so there are races that are being very closely watched, which will determine ultimately the outcome of who controls the state legislature. And why is that important? That's important because that means that's going to have the greatest impact on policy here in the state, and which laws, what legislation gets passed and acted on. So as it relates to the hierarchy, of course, you've got a Republican governor sitting at the top of the hierarchy, and then you have a Democratic Secretary of State, which has not happened in quite some time. In fact, I don't even recall it ever being the case. So we've had a Republican governor and a Democratic Secretary of State. I might be wrong on that. Can't remember exactly when that, if that's ever been the case. But then also, to Corey's point, we have more diversity in the hierarchy of the state government. And then as you get down into the legislative seats, you're seeing a tightening of the gap between Republicans and Democrats. And I think that's largely, again, because you've got so many more people that have moved to this county, a lot more moderate to liberal in their vote, in their thinking. A lot of folks coming from California and the Western United States into Arizona, and that has really helped to, what I would say, to balance kind of the politics here in Arizona, where for many, many, many years, I've been in Arizona for 30 years. It was heavily Republican. For all of you who've been here for all these years, you've seen it. And I just think we've seen a moderation of the politics in Arizona over the years. Now, that's still yet to be seen, because politics, as you know, is local. And so as you get outside of Maricopa County and get into the rural communities, it might be a little bit different. But I think here in Maricopa County, you're seeing a lot more moderation of political views.
Thank you. Shelley, I want to ask you this next question. So early voting began last week on October 7th, and there's been a lot of conversation around voting down the ballot. So what does that mean, and why is it important?
Yeah, so when someone says we need to vote all the way down the ballot, that means that we need to shift our focus, right? Or learn how to do two things at one time. A lot of the conversations that are usually in the big election years, like the presidential election this year, we also have the US Senate race. Usually those conversations are centered at the top, right? Like who's going to be our president, who's going to represent Arizona in the Senate. And yes, those things are really important, but our local races actually impact you a lot. Depending on what issues that you care about or what your socioeconomic status may be, etc., whoever your local elected officials are, they actually have the power to create policy that can impact you tomorrow, right? And so when we say we need to vote down the ballot or we need to pay attention to down ballot votes, that means, yes, your presidential and your Senate race matters, but let's not forget about the city council race. Let's not forget about your local school board race, right? Because your school board elected officials are folks who can set the direction for curriculum, can create new policies can create new policies and essentially set the direction for what the school year is going to look like, which is super important, especially in a year like this where school boards are having to make a lot of decisions around COVID and the safety of students and teachers and parents. And so there are races like that that are super important that, again, will immediately affect you depending on the decisions that they make at that level. And so down ballot allows us to really think about, okay, what is happening here? Who should I be paying attention to? And what should I be paying attention to? So aside from school board races and local races, there are also ballot initiatives, right, that are statewide that are also going to affect us. As Carl was saying, there are also state legislative positions. For the state legislator, when we're looking at that, I like to think of it as like our mini branches of government, right? So a lot of times we learn in school on the federal level that there's Congress, there's the president, there's the Supreme Court, but we actually don't dive into a lot what that looks like here on the local level, which is our state representatives, our state Senate folks, and then we also have our governor here, right? Our governor's not up for election right now, but it is super important who we have in our state legislator because they make decisions and create policy that is going to affect us on the state level. So these races are super important. I know it can be confusing. I like to tell folks that if they are looking to find more information about a certain candidate or about a ballot initiative, to look at local organizations that they trust. So there are a lot of organizations here doing amazing work, like Arizona Coalition for Change, which is a nonpartisan organization that's mobilizing people and getting them informed. There's also Lucha, there's MeAZ. And so there are a lot of organizations out there that are actually breaking these things down and saying, this is what this means. This is what happens when this person gets into office. And this is how this vote will affect you.
Thank you. And that kind of leads, and if you guys have questions, please enter them in the chat and we'll be sure to address it with our panelists. And so there's a question in the chat, which also kind of coincides with our next question, which is that Shelley also, touched on, that there's a lot of focus on like the federal elected roles, like the president, the Senate, and the representatives, but the state ones are just as important. So can we kind of maybe explain the difference of some of these roles? So like in the chat, Simeon asks, can you explain the difference between the city manager versus the mayor versus the vice mayor? And, maybe also someone wants to speak to the importance of what the board of supervisors are, or the county recorder and the county attorney. Yeah, I think having some information distinguishing those roles, it would be really important, as some of those offices are on the ballot for this election.
I'm happy to speak to that in terms of, talking about the council manager form of government, because a lot of people have questions about that. In a place like Tempe, we do fall under what they call a council manager form of government, which I believe pretty much every city and town in the state of Arizona falls under. Even I grew up in the New York area in a city called New Rochelle, and we also had a council manager form of government. And what it basically means, if I'm going to break it down to, kind of the most basic explanation, the mayor and city council act as the board of directors for like a nonprofit board. We set the policy. We basically talk about what we want to do with regard to How do we want to address the challenge with homelessness? How do we want to create more affordable housing? How do we want to spur economic development? And what kinds of companies do we want to attract? And then we talk about exactly what those things are. The staff who were there, meaning the city manager and the people that report to that person, their responsibility is to execute from an operational standpoint, from a day-to-day standpoint. Obviously, it's not the council members that go out and pick up trash in neighborhoods, or that make sure that the water quality is safe to drink or to bathe in. Those are obviously trained professional staff members that are the ones that implement on what the council members want each and every day. What many people don't know is that, at being the mayor of the city, myself and the other 6 members of the council, we only have 4 people that we are actually able to hire and fire: the city manager, city attorney, city clerk, and presiding judge of the court. Everyone else falls under the city manager. So many times, people will see something on TV and they'll say, Corey, can you fire this person? Or can you move this person out? And many times they're asking me to move people out where I actually, by charter, don't have any authority. And if I actually did those things, I would be removed from office for violating the charter and for violating certain statutes. So, so my job really is much more from the perspective, it's a board of directors kind of position where I set, sort of along with the council, the high level vision for where the city is supposed to go. But we have a city manager and their staff who implement that vision and see it through. The other quick thing I'll say very quickly, because I know there are other people who can speak to the other portions as well. But, I think it's really important to take part and vote in every single position that's on your ballot, because those positions are huge. Just talking about even one position, the county recorder. The county recorder has to do with voting here in Maricopa County when it comes to, polling lines, polling locations, how your ballot is received and counted. When our most recent county recorder, Adrian Fontes, was elected, he put a system into place where you could actually get text message. You could sign up to register and get text message alerts when you mailed your ballot in. So when the ballot was actually received, and when the ballot was counted and the signature was verified. I used that system and posted about it on my personal Facebook page over the last week. And so that's a really important system when people are very much concerned about, if I mail my ballot in, is my ballot going to be received? Are things working at the post office? Is it going to get to the county recorder's office to be counted? But that system is in place because of the current county recorder who put that system in place that said, we have got to make sure that we restore people's faith in voting, and that, if you drop your ballot off at a post office box, if you go into a post office, that it's going to be received and counted and verified. So that's why, just as an example, all of these positions matter. I know Deidre can speak very much to the Board of Supervisors, so I'm going to let her cover that because she's very much invested in that race. But you've got to make sure, and I would say that you got a ballot. The fact that you get a ballot usually 4 weeks in advance of when you actually have to vote is critical. It gives you time to do some research. You're not pressed to say, I've got to figure this out in 48 hours or forfeit my ballot. If you don't know something about a certain position, pick up the phone, ask someone, do a Google search, ask a friend, ask a family member. I many times will open my ballot and I see a bunch of people who are judges. We all talk about the judges. And I don't know who all these people are. I've been in politics for 15 years. I don't know. But I reach out to friends of mine who are in the legal profession and know something about those judges and their records and whether or not they should sit on the bench or not. So I have to do my own homework to make sure that I can fill my ballot out in a careful way. So I would encourage everyone to vote all the way up and down the ballot, front, back. And if you don't know something, there's no shame in that. Just simply ask for help because someone can help you.
So the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors is in some ways very similar to how Mayor Corey described the City Council. So the Board of Supervisors is also a council manager situation. And there are certain positions that are connected to the Board of Supervisors that the Board of Supervisors cannot terminate. However, there are many positions that they can and do. So just to kind of start out on the big picture, the Board of Supervisors is a legislative, an executive, and a quasi-judicial government body. It is the only position that does all three roles. They also are, in addition to they set local tax rates, they approve budgets, and they provide funding for all of the issues you can imagine. There is almost 500 entities, authorities, boards, commissions, departments, and special taxing districts that are under the Board of Supervisors. And other than the 6 county elected officials that are also under the funding of the Board of Supervisors and the policy, the other ones are all appointed by the Board of Supervisors. There's a $3 billion budget that is spread out to these almost 500 entities. Many of these entities have hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars budgets. It's from really everything you can imagine: schools, parks, libraries, public safety, public facilities, infrastructure. Absolutely everything that you could be passionate about, the Board of Supervisors touches it in some way. There are, in addition to the congressional districts that you have, then you have the legislative districts, and then this year, for the first time for many people, they found out that there's a county district. And those county districts in Maricopa County, there are 5 of them, 1 through 5, and every district has a supervisor that they are electing to represent their district, but then collectively those 5 supervisors make policy decisions for the entire county of Maricopa County. And most people have never heard of their Board of Supervisors meeting at all. And they've never heard of the Board of Supervisors. They've never heard of their supervisor that they've elected. And they don't even know that they have these meetings that you can go to that where you can discuss these things. On the department level, the ones that are on the ballot, Mayor Corey just spoke about the recorder's office, but we also have, for example, the county treasurer. His job, like the major job, is to oversee all of the tax dollars for Maricopa County, not just the $3 billion budget for Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, but also another $3 billion for some other entities. And then they are supposed to invest it, right, to make sure that our money is put in good places where it's safe and can be maximized. So having either a county treasurer who knows and understands investment, or preferably they're supposed to hire their second in command who knows how to do those functions. The county attorney is the one that decides who to prosecute and what for. And this is what's important. So the legislature passes laws, but the county attorney decides how to implement those laws, who to prosecute, and who to give leniency to. And this is a huge directive on the county attorney's office. It's so important that we have people who both want to support making sure that we have law and order, but also don't want to unnecessarily prosecute people who need aid and help, such as mental illness. We need people to address that. And then one other one that I'll highlight is, two very quickly, the county assessor. While the Board of Supervisors decides on what your assessment tax is, the county assessor decides how much property you have that needs to pay that tax. Right now we have drones that go and just measure the walls of your home. And under Arizona state law, you don't pay property tax on your garage. The drone doesn't know you have a garage, so it considers it all living space. That's a problem. We need actual people who go by just the living space. And lastly is the county superintendent of public education or public instruction. That one, her most important job, the primary function of that office, is that when we have open school board slots, she appoints people to those school boards until the next election. The Board of Supervisors, all open slots they appoint except for school boards. The superintendent does that, and we always want to have people serve on those boards who want to maximize our public education and the tools for our children. Because one last thing on school boards, one of the things that we miss is school boards actually determine also what policies and how to enforce them. So, for example, dress codes that target girls as sex objects that distract boys in class, that is a school board level decision. They can decide how to make that punitive or helpful.
Thank you very much for those explanations. You all answered a lot of questions that I've personally had, and I'm sure a lot of people in the county has had. Um, I am a resident of the city of Tempe, and I've had several people reach out and ask about the selling of bonds for streets for public safety. I want to touch on public safety because with all kinds of movements and things going on in the selling of bonds for public safety. What does that actually mean? So I want to address that. Go to Mayor Woods about that. So we talk about defunding the police. That's been a part of movements, things of that nature. So when you see that type of question, what is it actually saying, and how does the city handle those budgets?
No, it's a great question, and that's actually one I've received a lot of during this election cycle. So we have five bond questions on the ballot for this November 3rd, totaling $349 million. Question number 3 is the one that you were referencing regarding public safety. It's for an additional $34 million for police and fire. So I'll try to make this as quick without getting too detailed. Basically, it's to create additional bonding capacity and authority for those two departments. However, what happens in that situation is the money is not specifically earmarked to any one thing. Like basically, if you actually vote yes on that bond, it doesn't automatically mean that there are going to be 100 AR-15 rifles purchased, or automatically means an armored vehicle is being purchased. What it really means is that the department, as in the Tempe Fire and Medical Rescue and the police department, would have additional bonding authority. They would then come back to the city council in the spring of 2021, probably around March, April, with their specific requests. But all of those in what we call the capital improvements budget, we kind of talk about it as shorthand as the CIP, but it's for the capital. It's for not for operations, for salaries, but typically for things, for hard fixed costs. But either way, all of those things then do have a formal public process where any resident could go line item by line item and say, what specifically is the Fire and Medical Rescue Department asking for? What specifically is the police department asking for? And the council has an opportunity to look at all of those items and reorder them, to move some of them up, to move some of them down, and even frankly to take certain items off if we, for whatever reason, think that they aren't necessary for the function of the department. And it's the same process, whether it comes to police, fire, water utilities, parks, whatever it happens to be, we sort of follow that same process. So I guess the biggest thing is what I want to leave people with is if the bond passes for public safety, it's the money's not specifically earmarked to individual items. You can go back to the previous year's capital budget that was approved before I became mayor and get a sense as to what some of the items on the table might be. But as an example, our fire chief, Greg Reese, he may have different priorities this year. Our new interim police chief, Jeff Glover, just started 5 days ago. So he may have very different priorities than the previous chief. So I think it's important for people to know that voting for it doesn't mean that the money is earmarked to specific items. It does give the departments additional capacity. But at the end of the day, all of the items that would be put forward by the departments and would be voted upon from council are going to be public, and the public will have ample opportunity for public comment and to share their feedback and insight.
Awesome. Thank you, Mayor Woods. Is there anyone else that wants to expound on that question?
People are fairly familiar with at least that bonds exist, and that most entities, whether they're city government, especially we see them on the school districts, putting bonds on the ballot so that people can vote for them to raise funds for those school districts, since the state legislature keeps trying to defund our public school system. But you should know that Maricopa County Board of Supervisors decided in 2014 to have 0 bonds in the county. They consider it a debt. And that means that we are literally, as they say, a cash pay system. If we don't have the cash, we don't pay. If we know that a bridge is going to fail in the county, then the board has to decide how to allocate funds coming in to save for eventually being able to afford to fix that bridge. If a bridge were to fail unexpectedly or fail before we saved our money, then we have no money to fix that bridge. We have to literally take it from another program. So we're not, and we're not forward thinking. We're not thinking of things that 20 years from now our community needs. Bonding issues are really important, and it's great because you can say you have, as an elected person, you have to go out and convince your community how important this project is and why this money is needed, and then the electorate gets to decide. So then you know whether or not they want to pay for this thing. But cash pay, there's very few government entities that do cash pay other than Maricopa County Board of Supervisors.
Can I make one quick follow-up to that as well, just really quickly? Just because Deidre's comment about the bridge, as someone remembers, in my third week on the job, we had a bridge fail in Tempe, so that hits very close to home for me, and so I completely appreciate the comments that she made and her position on this. The other thing I'll just say really quickly about it is that when you think about bonding and about taking out some form of debt, I'm just going to use the simplest example I can. We might decide to take out bonds because we need to build, I'm just putting this out, this is a hypothetical, we're not really doing this, but because the city needs a new public library. So kids will have the ability to go check out books, or a place where they can learn to read, or members of the public can check out books or videos, or obtain other kinds of community services. That allows us to get those projects done in such a way that the people who are actually paying the taxes now in the city can actually enjoy the amenities. If I tell you, let's say you have a 3-year-old child at home, and I tell you, we're going to have to save up enough cash to actually build a new library or a new rec center, and it's going to take us 15 years to save up all of the cash so we can build that rec center. Yet your kid is 18 years old when that happens. They're not a kid anymore at that point. So you as a resident of the city of Tempe, you as a taxpayer, you're not getting access to any of these things, and nor you or your family. So the reason why people bond is so we actually have the ability to do things and deliver on promises and amenities to the people who are living here now. Because once again, if it takes us 15 years to save up the cash for a new rec center or a new gym facility or whatever it happens to be, your 3-year-old is 18 years old. They're a grown person at that point, and they don't get to take advantage of those services. And frankly, I think that's not providing the services that every person living in the city or living in Maricopa County, frankly, deserves now, not later.
Thank you for that. So our final question as we're getting ready to wrap up is, and I think you guys kind of all, touched on it a little bit during your introductions, and especially you, Shelley, this election cycle has definitely awoken many more young professionals to be more aware of politics. So someone who's watching, this live stream and they're feeling really inspired, what would be your recommendation or the best way to, start to get involved and take those steps into being involved in the community politically? I'll start with Shelley, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I can go ahead and start. When I think about being able to get involved with the community, I first like to tell people to find something that you are personally interested in. I think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice when we try to force ourselves in places that don't feel right to us, right? And we all have issues that we care about. So if you are interested in education and want to know how education and education money moves in our state, then maybe start to get involved with the Arizona Education Association, or follow a local school board member, or follow someone who is in the education realm so you can start to be a part of those spaces. If you are someone who says, you know what, police brutality is really important to me, and that's where I want my end to be, then get involved in looking at exactly what Mayor Corey Wood said about looking at the city council budget, looking at organizations that are already doing the work like Poder in Action and other amazing organizations, right? So the good thing is that we don't have to start from scratch. There are already people out there doing the work. There are already organizations out there doing the work. So for me, I would say if you want to it would be best to find your niche, find something that you are really passionate about, and let that be your in. also don't overwhelm yourself. I know that there are a lot of different positions and things on the ballot. There's a lot always going on in our world. And so sometimes folks get discouraged because they feel like they need to be a part of every single thing. I have been organizing for years, and sometimes I'm still learning about new positions or new things that are happening in politics or in social justice. And so giving yourself some grace to ease into it and to get involved, I think is super important. And now the last thing I would say in the sense of getting involved is to find people who are going to push you and challenge you. It's okay to be around people who have the same interests as you, but let them push you a little, let them challenge you, because that's how we get better as a community. So don't be afraid of conflict. I think that's how we get better.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Crown Counsel, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, today's political environment is so hyper partisan. So what I'm about to say may not resonate, but it certainly did for me back when I was approached to go and work for U.S. Senator John McCain. And so when the individual who came to me said that the senator's office was looking for somebody to come work for him as a staff assistant, my first reaction to that question was, well, isn't he a Republican, and why would I do that? And here's the response that this person gave me, who has gone on to be a very close friend and mentor over these last 30 plus years. He said, Carl, it matters not what party he is. You just need to go over there and sit down, shut up, and learn something. And I think that really applies still yet today, even in this hyper-partisan politics that we have, which is this. Find somebody, find a cause, find an opportunity to get involved. Don't worry about the political persuasion or aspect of it, unless that's really your thing. What I have found is that policy, and Corey can talk more directly to this than the others, policy is done between the lines, not out on the hyper-partisan edges of politics. And so the point is that try to find some place that you can go in and learn something, and you really learn something, because things are going on today that you can contribute to as a young person or an individual just getting started, but also you're going to learn an awful lot, and that's going to carry you forward for a number of years. And what it's also going to do is it's going to serve as an example for others just like you that want to accomplish the same thing. So my message would be to get in there, sit down, shut up, and learn something.
Absolutely. That's to be perfectly honest, that's how you learn. And like you said, Shelley, thank you for saying that. I'm all about collaboration, creating alliances with people in the city, and it's already there. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. That's so very important. And so, just as we just go into closing remarks, I don't want to hold anybody very long. If there's anything, quickly that anyone has to say to lead the community, please, take a couple of moments to do so.
Real quickly, if you're interested in judge information, there is great resources you can Google civic engagement beyond voting and look for their 2020, or at cebv.us/2020. I think you should rewind and listen to Shelley again to know what to do going forward if you want to be involved. And my biggest thing that I always recommend, especially to young people, but anybody that wants to be on any kind of activism, whether it's activism within communities or part of nonprofits or go into politics on any level, for the love of God, please take marketing. That is what so many people are missing. We know what's wrong, but we don't know how to sell it.
That's great.
I'll just make this comment as we close. This might seem pretty self-evident, but to quote Larry Sabato, he says, every election is determined by the people who show up. What that means is that the people that don't show up have a profound impact on who gets elected. And the people that don't show up are the ones that we really need to work on today, because they're the ones that really actually are going to determine the outcome of this election. So my message would be that, look, we've got to make sure that we start with our own family members, and we start with our own friends and our own networks, and to make sure every single person is registered to vote, that they actually do go out and vote, that they make a plan and they actually cast their ballot. You'll see I'm wearing my sticker. My wife and I drove our ballot down to the Maricopa County elections and dropped it in the box. We didn't need to do that, but we did, and we dropped it off there. But it's incredibly important for every single body that's listening, everybody that's listening, to not forget about your own family members while you're out there on the streets, activating the vote. Make sure your own family has registered, make sure that they have cast their ballot, and make sure that they have a plan to vote if they're going to the polls on election day.
Thank you. Mayor Woods, do you have any closing remarks?
Other than just to tell everyone here, once again, I really appreciate you taking the time on a Saturday morning/afternoon to listen to this great panel and to take part. So I just appreciate the time, and just, vote. This election is going to be decided in a little over 2 weeks. And so if you haven't already done so, as Carl said, make a plan and go out and vote and be a part of the change that we need to be a part of.
Absolutely. Well, again, to my community advocates, leaders, all those alike, it's very important that this information is out there. You guys answered a lot of questions that I had myself, and I hope that the community appreciates receiving the information that they got today. And of course, I would be wrong if I did not promote the Urban League Young Professionals. We always have room for people to come and join us in the movement. There is a lot of work to be done. Again, as Shelley said, there are amazing organizations out here, but YP is a great place to start. Obviously we have connections to very important people in the city. So if you're interested in being a leader in the city, YP is a great place to start. Again, my name is DeMarco Kaysen. I am your Civic Engagement Chair for Urban League Young Professionals in the Greater Phoenix Urban League. And again, thank you for joining us. And we hope to see you again in Q1 for our next Brunch and Learn series. So yeah, again, community, thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.